Okay. Colossians and Philippians, all the way up to lesson 6. You guys are doing good. Commendations to you guys for doing the heavy work on this, because there's a lot of reading, and I appreciate that. Okay. There we go. All right, let's take a look at, first we're going to look through Colossians and then Philippians, just like it goes through in your questions. So let's kind of do a little overview of how we got there with these guys on the second missionary journey, and on the third journey. And this is the second one in particular. You can see that Paul, as he was going around, he missed Colossae, which is right here in the middle. And you remember that, and this is in Asia, and you remember that the Holy Spirit had forbidden him at that time to go into Asia, even though he kept wanting to work to the west here. He was forbidden, and so he ended up going way up here and bypassing and going all the way around. And then, of course, when he got back to Ephesus here, spent some time there, and then back home again. And then as we went on the third journey, this was not a place that he ended up going to. But there is an interesting individual named Epaphras that we run across, and he's from Colossae. And just from the different letters, we won't go into the detail of it, but from the different letters and writings that we know of back and forth that Paul was writing, we find some things about Epaphras. And apparently he was converted by Paul in the time that he was spending there at Ephesus. And then it's possible that he was the one that actually went back as a result of that and then started the church there at Colossae, and because that's his hometown basically. And then and then at some time we went and visited Paul in Rome to report on the condition of the church at Colossae. And so that's how we get to that basically. And so then we see that the letters then that went out that Paul was writing from prison went out again 62 to 63 AD, right at the end of that fall, or in the beginning of before spring of 63 AD. And this area down here that's circled, these are the three letters that basically that Tychicus and Onesimus took out with him, and it went to the Ephesians. Ephesus was right there. You had Colossae is right just next to Laodicea, and then Philemon, of course, had the letter to Philemon was being carried by Onesimus, and he was from Colossae. So you can see how we basically got to where it is that we are with that letter. So let's take a look at the Christians that were there at Colossae. Again, we only have what is written in this particular letter to give us information on this, but we know that Paul never visited the congregation in the written documents that we have. That it's possible that he never went through there, and so as a result, that's going to impact what he's writing. He's getting information from Epaphras on the brethren there, and we can see that in the writing on places that he never went to. It's a different kind of letter than those that he's familiar with, and we get a little bit of both today because he spent a lot of time in Philippi as far as going through there. One of the things that was kind of interesting was the idea about the prisoners. Epaphras and Aristarchus are mentioned by Paul as being fellow prisoners. Now, you would think that the term bondservant is used in some of the versions. The New American Standard has a bondservant, for instance. Now, that term has been used before. Paul's used that term before in talking about us and our relationship with God as being a bondservant, and himself being a bondservant. But in this particular letter, we also, it's mentioned these other folks, and Timothy, Mark, Luke, Justus, Demas, all those were people that he mentions in the letter, and Brother Waldron makes a good point. He's mentioning them almost in the same sentence, and he's not talking about them being bondservants. And they were every bit as faithful Christians as the two that he did mention as being, in bondage. So it makes them think that whatever the reason was, it's possible that they were also being delayed there for some reason and imprisoned in some way. But it just gives you kind of an idea of why maybe Epaphras didn't take the letter himself when the letter was going back to his hometown. Something kept him in Rome with Paul. Colossae itself is just a smaller, kind of out-of-the-way city. This is a picture of some of the ruins from present day. And it and Philippi had a lot in common as far as its geography and the way it was set up on from a valley up to a hill. But it was kind of a smaller, out-of-the-way. It's kind of a Cookeville versus a Nashville kind of a situation. Out of the way, not much in the way of things going on there. Primarily Gentiles, of course. If you have a small city, and we're going to see that with Philippi, that whether or not a Jewish synagogue was in the town, tells us a lot about the size of the city. But one of the things about these guys, of course, is the problem that Paul was concerned about before, and that is the idea of no apostles having gone through there. And so we don't have the written word yet. We have the Old Testament, but we have no Jews. So do we have the Old Testament available to them? Maybe not. So we got a Gentile population there that's never had an apostle go through. So the only people that have gone through are people who have been maybe laid hands on by the apostles. So there is the word is getting there. But again, it's of concern because it's a thin layer, it's a thin crust of faith that's there, could easily be broken, and that's one of the things that's the problem, and it's a concern for Paul, and you can hear it in the letter itself. The special characteristics of the Colossian letter, it's similar to the Ephesian letter. It's condensed down versus the Ephesians. The Ephesian letter is an expanded version of these topics. The Colossian letter, you can see the topics, but they're condensed. Basically, it's a shorter letter itself. But the ideas of what is it that was bothering Epaphras that he is talking to Paul about, and these are some of the things that are covered that are part of this heresy or false teaching that's going on there that Paul's going to address in the letter. Ceremonialism, and half of these are like off-brand Jewish kinds of problems, and the other ones are kind of early Gnostics. The Gnostics have not, they don't take power and start really causing problems until much later than this. So, but the ideas you can see are starting to bubble up a little bit. And so as you look at the list, ceremonialism, of course, that's something that's associated with the Jews. Asceticism, this idea of severe self-discipline, the beating yourself, with a rod, because to get yourself into submission, that kind of thing. Angel worship, depreciation of Christ. Paul really emphasizes this with the supremacy of. I was looking back there for hand signals. My third base coach, but he's just rubbing his head. Okay. Secret knowledge, of course, that's early Gnostics, and the reliance on human wisdom and tradition. So, all right. So that's the Colossian letter. When we get the 4 questions, that's the background on that. And let's take a look at the Philippian letter. Of course, we're all familiar with Philippi. That was the first big city in Macedonia that Paul was sent through under the direction of the Holy Spirit. And so he went through there many times. On the second journey, on the third journey, back and forth, he went through at least 3 times going through Philippi. very, very familiar with the folks there. Lydia, you remember her. And the letter was carried by Epaphroditus. And so you can see the other three letters went down here. You can see why Paul sent this by a different person, because it's going to a whole different continent. The Christians at Philippi, again, mostly Gentiles, and this is the kind of place that warms my heart. This is a military retirement community for the Roman army, basically. It's sort of like the Peachtree City down in Atlanta for old airline pilots that were ex-Air Force guys. So basically, they're mostly Gentiles because they're the Roman soldiers. Most of them are citizens because, again, they were Roman soldiers in the background. They got paid well in retirement. They're a prosperous city. And this is the biggest city in northern Macedonia. There's no Jews, or if there are any, very few, because you have to have at least 10 adult males in a city to be able to have a synagogue, and they had no synagogue. So we're in a situation that we're less than 10 adult male Jews in the city. So the odds are pretty low of them having, and you can again tell that in the letter itself. Well grounded in the gospel, because Timothy remained there through all of Paul's second and third missionary journeys. Paul just left him there, and he would join Paul and go back and stuff. So a lot of good teaching going on, as we could tell, Paul's trust in Timothy. And we could see a lot of the fruits of that with Paul getting a lot of financial support out of the Philippians. Again, a small congregation, but willing to just step up and support the efforts that are there. And so that says a lot about the maturity that they're gaining up there. So, special characteristics, there's not a single Old Testament quote in this letter. And so that tells us again where the focus is. It's on the Gentiles. And it's basically, you think of it as a missionary kind of thank you letter, because it's a progress report on what Paul's been doing and everything. And again, his close ties that he has with them brings that out. And then there are some personal admonitions that Paul is, because he cared deeply about the brethren there. So you can tell it's a personal letter. I mean, because of the details that Paul has in there. And then the spiritual admonitions were basically just to behave appropriately and beware of false teachers. He's going to cover that in chapter 3. Okay, so, Question 1. We're back to Colossians. Okay, so you can open your book back up to that, get your questions out. Okay, what was Paul's purpose in writing the letter? What was the theme, and how was the letter organized? So let's go over some ideas on what the purpose was. Shirley? Okay.
Do not let anyone spoil you as a picture of a true Christian, and be thankful for what you have.
Okay. So the purpose and the theme here is kind of pretty close, and you're touching on both of those. I mean, was there a problem with false doctrine in Colossae? Say yes. Paul wouldn't have written a letter just to say hi. Okay, Epaphras is giving them some information. So yeah, there was some. Chapter 3 is going to handle a lot of that's in there, and he's got it spattered throughout. But the Shirley's point is a good one, because the idea of the supreme Christ, so much better in Christ than anything else that you could be doing. That's kind of the major theme that's running through there, and he uses that to not only exhort the folks and build them up, but also to counter the false teaching that's going on there. You saw that whole list of things. People thinking that maybe those things were better than Jesus. Not even close. Okay, so then how is it organized? Can you break this one up into parts, this book? Or if you were going to break it up, how would you break it up? Tick, tick, tick. John?
Supremacy of Christ, and then chapter 3 and 4 about submission.
Okay, good. Yeah, the practical part of it is the second part, and the doctrinal parts is kind of the first part. All right, very good. All right, so question 2. Chapter 1 of Colossians provides a breathtaking description of the riches and the glory of Christ. The term "He is" used 4 times in this chapter in the New American Standard, and I didn't check any other versions if there were more, but he introduces the characteristics of Christ that help us to understand who he is. List the characteristics emphasized by Paul in these passages, and I gave you 3 of them, and I'll give you a hint. There's 4 in the list in these 3 passages, and explain their significance. So let's go to the first one, 1:15. We won't read it because you'll get the answer when you read it, but give me your answer. Chapter 1, verse 15. What does it tell you here in chapter 1, verse 15 about who Jesus is, who he is? And then what's the significance?
My version says, he is the image of the invisible God, firstborn over all creation. And it reflects that idea that Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And that is brought out here. And that, I like the way this worded it. He was the physical image of the invisible God.
Fantastic. Very good. Okay, how about verse 17? Verse 17. Using Jeff's format, what does it tell you about he is, and what's the significance of that? If you cheat, you can just read it. He is what?
For and all things consist by.
Okay, and then in him, Bonnie, you just died to answer this one. What's that? All things are held together. Okay, so what's the significance of those things? He was before all things. What is it? Why is that significant? He wasn't created. Okay, so he was the creator, right? All right, so that's significant. There are some denominations that think that Jesus was a created being, okay, and just not.
Yeah, it's almost like Paul anticipating that argument because he just made a mistake about him being the firstborn of all creation. And for but here he says, no, he's before all things, and the margin has existed prior to all things. And so that cannot mean that he was created.
Good, correct. Okay, and all things are held together. Those of you in my evolutionary class, all right, this is for you guys. All things are, what does that mean? That through Jesus, all things are held together. And it is an evolution, having to do with the evolution class. What does the Creator control from a practical standpoint, you guys, scientists? What does he control? E equals MC squared. Laws of nature, right? Like gravity and things like that. And all the Creator created those things, right? So what is he saying? Is God still involved? He's not only preeminent, Jesus is sitting on the throne right now. He's got all authority given to him, and he's still in control of the stuff. And when he's done with the stuff, he's going to burn it up. That's the end. Okay, so yeah, that's significant that all things are held together. Verse 18. There's 2 of them in verse 18. Give me one. He is head of the body, okay, which is defined as the church, okay. And what is the church? And if he's the head of this organization, who's the head of the king? Sovereignty, right? Yeah, okay. So very good. So he's the head of everything. The church is what? What does the word church mean? Ecclesia, the called out. Okay. So a group set aside for a special purpose, right? Okay. So and Jesus has the sovereignty of that. Is that pretty important? Yes, important. Okay. What's the second one in verse 18 there? He is firstborn. He is the beginning, right? The firstborn from the dead. Okay, firstborn from the dead. Is that different from the firstborn of all creation? Yeah, okay. So what's this firstborn of the dead, and why is that important? Did I see a hand over there, Sam?
It means having the authority more so than just being born or created.
Very good. Extra star on your report card for this one. Yeah, that's right. It means two things: preeminence, right? And we get that in the Old Testament from what? Where have we seen that before in the Old Testament? Many times. Birthright, yeah, discussion of the birthright, double the portion, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. So, but let's go back to the firstborn from the dead. Why is that important? What does that indicate? That's very important for you and me. Resurrection, yes. He's the one that was the first one that was resurrected and then would what? Lazarus was resurrected, right? So he wasn't. But Lazarus had something that Jesus had something that Lazarus' resurrection did not. And what was that? Immortality. Exactly. He's the firstborn of the dead that put the devil out of business, right? Keys to Hades, he's got them. Death is now gone as a result of that for those who believe. And he's the first one in line. He was the first one to walk through that door. And we're just lined up behind him, right? He's opened the door and we're ready to go. So, very good. Those are important things that we need to know in this. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
It says, and through him reconcile everything to himself by making peace through the blood of his cross, whether things on earth or things in heaven. And to me, everything else was a setup for that. It shows that he was the first, he was in creation, he did this, he did that, now he's the head of the church. Well, so what? Well, so what is that he by doing that, he can reconcile us to it and make peace for us, and making peace in heaven and earth.
Very good.
The result of all those things that are established ahead of that.
And that's what the door opening was all about, was being able to, now everybody that believes, lives by faith, basically could walk now through that open door, which Jesus has now made possible. It was closed before to a certain group of people who was, basically it was, they were running under a different system there for a while. So, and of course we know that ultimately anybody that obeyed God under whatever system they happened to be in was ultimately going to be there, but it was just tougher for the Gentiles because they just didn't have. It was just tougher. Go ahead, Ray.
I've already been through this, but it says in verse 4, chapter 4 of Ephesians, there is one body, one spirit, even as he is called in the one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, and one baptism. And it goes on verse 6 there to say, one God, one Father of all, who is above all, through all, and in you all.
So the unity issue associated with that. Yep. Okay, so let's go on to question 3. In chapters 2 and 3 of Colossians. In the New American Standard, the term therefore is used 4 times. And it's listed right there. In the 4 statements attached to this word, what practical instructions are given? What problems could be avoided by applying these 4 statements to our attitudes and actions? So let's take a look at these first. The first one's in chapter 2, verses 6 and 7. Walk in him. Okay, so what does it mean to walk in something? Okay, so it's the life you're living, and you're abiding by that authority, and that's directing your life. Okay, so that's the first one. All right, so how about the second one? Verse 16. Therefore, what? Okay, what's the significance of this right here? Okay, Jeff?
Physical things. If you read through that list, there are things you can see and actions, but it brings it back to, it says in my version, the substance is the Messiah. What's important is focusing on Christ and go back to the first one, walking in Him, not on all these days and all the things that are listed there, festivals, new moons, and I think those physical things versus the Messiah.
What was the problem that the Colossians were facing that would cause Paul to give this as a remedy?
Teaching or these are old practices they had,
Okay.
and they were causing them not to relate to Christ properly.
Okay, and now you can see where that would be a problem in a Gentile congregation. Who's going to teach the Gentiles about the Old Testament law and the prophets to help them find Christ? Well, nobody. There's nobody there. So how easy would it be for somebody to show up in town and say, I got the answer for you. Let me tell you about, you need to be circumcised. Well, don't you remember? God, same God, right? Back here. He says, man, you got to be circumcised. I can show you. I got this scroll back at home, man, and it tells you, you can see where the problem would be, right? So Paul's trying to cut some of these problems off, short circuit them a little bit, and give them some things that they need to remember. Hey, the Old Testament, gone. Go ahead.
Can sometimes come and say, do you realize that this Jesus that you worship on Sunday was actually a Jew, and his name was Yeshua? Mm-hmm. And let me tell you about Judaism, and you don't know enough about it, and so you don't really understand your own Savior. They could do that to these people too, and tell them all about this Old Testament they don't know as well, and convince them that these things need to be followed. But right here, Paul heads it off and says, no, you're not required to do any of those things.
Yeah, and it's a warning for us that somebody comes in and says, hey, man, just study the New Testament. That's what you're under. True. But it was all put in the Bible for our learning, because false teachers can come waltzing in and all of a sudden say, and if you haven't studied, you could be prone to that. All right, how about chapter 3, verse 1? This is about priorities here. What's Paul saying here about priorities? What should the priority be? Okay.
For Christ, sit on the right hand of God.
All right. Yeah. So spiritual things need to be given a priority. So, and why? What would this be a remedy for? Would the Gentiles be prone to this? Would we be prone to this if somebody didn't tell us? Priorities are about lining things up, right? So you got choice A and choice B. Choice A is the world. Choice B is heaven, God. You know, a lot of good stuff over in the world. That looks pretty good, right? Well, this looks pretty good too. So what am I going to give the priority to? Right? And so Paul's telling them, hey, give the priority over here. You know what's over here, right? The pagan thing. So that would be important for these guys. So the last one, verse 5 of chapter 3. And it kind of feeds off of the one before it. Clarissa, you're doing that. Why does it feed off the what? What is this one?
The works of the sinful things you did before. You're not going to pursue.
What word is used to describe that? It's a process word. Well, we see that the word conform is something we're not supposed to do, but transform is something, and transformation is a change, right? Whereas conforming is to molding yourself to look like this over here. Well, now that you look like this, we need you to change and not look like that anymore, right? We're going to transform you from this ugly caterpillar over here into this beautiful butterfly. All right, and that's the transformation that goes on. And why would that be important for these guys? Paul wouldn't have said it if it wasn't going to be short-circuiting something bad. Why would that be important? What happens if you don't transform? You're thinking about heavenly things now, but you're not transforming. You haven't changed your life. Okay, so you got one foot in the world, one foot in heaven. You're fighting against it back and forth. Who's going to win that battle? If you just leave that foot in the world, who's going to win that battle? It's your body that they're fighting over. Who's going to win that battle? Gil, who's going to win that battle? Not you, that's right. Your body's going to tell you, this doesn't feel good. I want to do this. It just feels better over here. And you got to think on higher things to be able to go in a different direction. So those Norm, go ahead. Yep. Right. It's hard enough to do disciplined things anyway. That's already hard enough to fight against you, because you're going to be fighting against the world. That's already hard enough. Why make it harder? Why make it, if you're all of a sudden designed to do this new thing, and you've transformed yourself so now you're able to do this new thing and you look like this new thing, it's harder to go back to the old thing because you're not designed for that anymore. You're now designed and transformed for this. If you're over here, now it's hard to go in the other direction. So it's just it's practical stuff Paul's trying to give us here. Okay, question 4. Colossians 2:18 and verse 23 gives us an idea of the heresy that was trying to gain the influence there. And Paul provides some things to do that will help the Colossians defeat them. What 4 decisions will tremendously assist you in carrying out Paul's instructions? Verses 14 through 17. All right, so there's a whole bunch of different things you could have put down, to answer this question. Give me one. Okay. 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 So basically the old law is gone. So anything having to do with the old law, if these guys are coming in here and they're teaching you that the old law has an impact or has an effect, that's not right. And so don't do that. So there that what in verse 14, what is it that Paul tells them that they could do that would greatly assist them in carrying out these instructions? Put on love. Okay. In verse 15, what would greatly assist in carrying out these instructions? Let the peace of Christ do what? Rule in your heart. Okay. Let the peace of Christ. Right. And as a result of that peace, then don't be anxious. Right. How about verse 16? What would really help here? Really help you out in making this work? Verse 16? Correct. Okay. But yeah, you want the word to richly dwell within you. I mean, live it. You be part of it. And then one of the ways you can do that is the fruit of that would be in the singing and all of that coming out. Verse 17. Do all in the name of the Lord. Whatever you do all in the name of the Lord. Those four things Paul gives them, said these will help you. If you do this, it will help you. Okay? So a lot of good stuff in there, but we have to go on. Philippians. All right, so give me the purpose of the letter written to the Philippians. Philippians isn't organized real well from the standpoint of being able to break it down easily. So just give me the purpose. What do you think? Why is Paul writing this? But why is Paul writing this letter? Why is he putting pen to paper here? Encouragement, right? Okay, yeah. He's wanting to encourage these folks. Did they do anything for him? Yeah, it's a thank you note, you guys. It's a big thank you note. It really is. I mean, these guys have been doing a great job, and he's thanking them for that. In some cases, they were the only ones that were sending them stuff, So, and then to warn about false teachers. That was also included, and there's a lot in there. Okay, if you wanted to break it down, I broke it down into chapters 1, 2, and 4 are all about the thank you, and chapter 3 is set aside for warnings. Okay, so if you want the warnings, you just go to chapter 3. All right, question 6. In Philippians 1:21, Paul says, "For me to live is Christ and to die is gain." What did Paul mean by this, and how did he exhibit it in his life? And give me an example. So, what does this mean? What did it mean to Paul? For me to live is Christ, to die is gain. Okay, for him, it was to preach God's word. That's right. That was his whole life. Okay, so and so give me an example of how Paul showed that this was. Sam? Nice. Okay. Okay. Very good. And just the examples of his sacrifices around, there's lots of examples of that. Okay, question 7. In Philippians 2:12, Paul says to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. So list some instructions given by Paul in chapter 2 that illustrate this command. Okay, so give me one. What's something that you would need to do to be able to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling? What would be helpful in doing that? Quit grumbling. Verse 14. Very good. Okay. Give me one more. Now that Shirley's giving you an example. Humility. Verse 3. That's right. Be humble. All right. Put others before yourself. Okay. Very good. And there's lots more there. Philippians, question 8. Paul uses the term joy and rejoice 15 times in the letter to the Philippians. For someone who has endured countless beatings and persecutions for the cause of Christ, he still maintained that same positive attitude towards his role as a servant of God. What formula does Paul provide the Christians in Philippians 4 to help us reach the righteous goal of rejoice in the Lord always? And why, when practiced, will these things help us get the desired result? Okay, so what would be some pieces of this formula that Paul puts out there? In chapter 4, after you're trying to reach this goal of rejoicing in the Lord always, how can you get to the point of being able to do that? Go ahead, Jeff. What you think about. Okay, all right, very good. That gets into your anxiousness. That's right. Yeah, that not being worried about all these other things. And what can help you avoid worrying? Prayer. That's right. Asking, and the attitude that you have in that prayer, which is with thanksgiving. Okay, if you're always thankful for everything, and you're always thinking about how wonderful and thankful you are, for that, it's hard to change your mind about that. Okay, so give me another one. How about your interaction with other people? How could you, what does Paul tell you you could do that would make that interaction with other people even better and better so that you're always rejoicing? How should you act towards others? Verse 5. Be gentle, kind towards others. Right, exactly. Okay, very good. There's your summary. Purpose and themes. And next time it's Philemon and Titus. Personal, here, now we're getting into real personal letters. One person we're writing to. And we're starting that section. All right.